What would you do if the only thing standing between you and disaster was a dog's refusal to give up? Why should you care? Because sometimes the most unlikely heroes save lives and remind us that trust, instinct, and compassion can mean more than words. Rain hammered down on the city of Portland that afternoon, turning sidewalks into silver rivers and muting the world in a steady drumming of water. Lightning flickered somewhere over the West Hills. EMT Lisa Carter barely noticed the storm outside the windshield as she guided her ambulance down Burnside, lights flashing, siren howling through the gray. She was locked in, focused, as always, on the call that had come through. Unresponsive male, possible cardiac event, coordinates pending. Just another shift. Just another dash against the clock. Her partner, Miguel, rode shotgun, reading out the sparse details over dispatch. It was all routine until it wasn't. The intersection ahead glowed red in the rain. Lisa barely slowed, checking for cross traffic, when a shape burst from the curb. A big, soaking wet German shepherd, streaked with mud, eyes wild with urgency. The dog lunged right into the path of the ambulance, barking, blocking their way. Lisa's foot slammed the brake hard. The vehicle skidded, tires hissing, and for a moment, she thought the dog would be crushed beneath them. But he didn't flinch. He planted himself in front of the grill, hackles up, drenched to the bone, staring at Lisa with an intensity that pinned her to her seat. "What the?" Miguel barked, halfway out of his seatbelt. But Lisa didn't move. She'd seen stray dogs before. She'd seen panicked pets run from car to car, sometimes trailing a broken leash or a lost owner's scent. But this dog was different. His gaze was locked onto her, as if pleading, "Listen to me." He barked again, deep and hoarse, paws dancing with agitation in the pouring rain. "Get out of the way!" Lisa shouted through the windshield, flicking the siren to short bursts. But the dog refused. Instead, he circled to the driver's side, barking frantically, and then darted back in front. Traffic behind them began to pile up. Horns blared, and a few pedestrians gathered under awnings, curious. But Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that the dog wasn't just lost or scared. He wanted her, them, to follow. Miguel's voice came sharp. "Lisa, we're wasting time. Someone needs us." Lisa glanced at the dashboard clock. Every second ticked heavier than the last. But the dog's eyes, full of stubborn, wet desperation, held her. Suddenly, Lisa's mind flashed back to her own childhood, the first dog she'd ever loved. Buddy, the shelter mutt, who once dragged her away from a broken power line during a thunderstorm. "Trust your instincts," her dad always said. Sometimes, the gut knows what the brain can't explain. Lisa shifted into park, heart pounding. "I need to check this out." Miguel shot her a look, half confusion, half annoyance, but she was already out of the cab, rain soaking through her uniform, boots splashing as she stepped toward the dog. The shepherd met her halfway, tail slashing rain, body quivering with adrenaline. He barked once, sharp, insistent, then trotted a few steps toward the curb, glancing back over his shoulder. Lisa followed, feeling the weight of every eye on her, including Miguel's impatient stare. The dog didn't bolt. He waited, urging her forward, paws dancing, until she was following him down a narrow alley flanked by graffiti and trash bins. "Lisa, we can't just leave the rig!" Miguel yelled, but she waved him off. "Just give me a minute." Something in her chest twisted. Fear, hope, she couldn't tell. The alley twisted, the shepherd never breaking pace, guiding her under a sagging fire escape and around a puddle so deep it reflected the neon sign above. For a split second, Lisa wondered if she was losing her mind, letting a dog lead her off route in the middle of a call. Then she heard it. a sound under the rain. Faint, gasping, desperate. The shepherd darted behind a dumpster, barking with renewed urgency. Lisa followed, heart racing, and found the source. An elderly man, crumpled in a heap, half hidden by discarded boxes. His lips were blue, his skin pallid, one hand clutching his chest. Lisa dropped to her knees, pulse leaping, EMT mode taking over. "Sir, can you hear me?" She fumbled for her radio. "Miguel, get the gurney. We have a live one, critical, back of the alley." Miguel swore but leapt into action, rolling the stretcher toward her, kit in hand. Lisa worked fast, checking airway, breathing, pulse. The shepherd pressed close, whimpering softly, eyes never leaving the man's face. "Who's he?" Miguel asked, panting. Lisa shook her head. "I don't know, but if it weren't for this dog, he'd be dead." She met the shepherd's eyes again, gratitude mingling with awe. For a split second, the rain didn't matter. The chaos faded away, and it was just her, the dog, and the man he'd refused to give up on. Sometimes, the difference between life and death comes down to instinct, the courage to trust, the stubborn refusal to walk away. And on that stormy Portland afternoon, Lisa Carter learned that heroes don't always wear uniforms, and help can arrive on 4 muddy paws. Rain drummed harder as Lisa Carter and her partner Miguel worked against time, the storm soaking their uniforms, the world around them blurring at the edges. The alley's neon reflections painted everything with a feverish, anxious glow. But the only thing that truly mattered in that moment was the man at their feet, barely breathing, pulse weak, soaked to the bone. The German shepherd stayed pressed close, his fur streaming with water, eyes full of worry and a kind of desperate hope. "Harold Miller, that's what it says on his wallet," Miguel called out, having quickly rifled through the man's jacket for ID. He handed it to Lisa, voice tense. 82 years old. Medical alert. Diabetes, high blood pressure, history of strokes. Lisa's heart sank. "We have to move fast." She ripped open her kit, hands steady, mind racing. Her voice was clear and commanding as she rattled off instructions to Miguel. IV line, oxygen, check for response. But she couldn't help noticing the dog, Max, never left Harold's side, nosing his hand gently, as if begging him to wake up. "Don't just stand there," she muttered to herself, feeling that old surge of adrenaline, part fear, part determination. They worked quickly, professional and precise. But Max's presence was a wild card. Most dogs would have run off by now, terrified by the noise and confusion. But this dog watched every move, never flinching, never looking away from Harold. If anything, his gaze urged them to work faster, to not give up. Miguel glanced at the dog and shook his head. "I've never seen anything like this. He's acting like family." Lisa nodded. Maybe he is, or maybe he just knows. Some animals can sense when something's wrong. They loaded Harold onto the gurney, the rain making everything slippery and difficult. Max let out a low, anxious whine, circling the paramedics, clearly afraid they were taking his human away forever. Lisa caught his eye. Something in his stare stopped her, and she knelt down, giving him a quick scratch behind the ear. "We're going to help him, buddy. I promise." For a moment, the dog stilled, then barked as if in response, tail lashing the puddles. It felt like he understood. Lisa stood, signaled Miguel, and together they rolled Harold out to the ambulance. The storm was at its worst now. Thunder cracked, wind sent trash spinning down the street, and bystanders sheltered under awnings, watching with wide, worried eyes. Lisa radioed dispatch. "Critical male, stroke suspected, unresponsive. We're inbound. ETA 7 minutes. Alert ER code red." As they loaded Harold into the back, Max tried to leap in after them, Lisa blocked him gently, shaking her head. "Not now, boy. We'll take care of him, I swear." The dog barked again, paws scrabbling on the slick metal step, desperation in every motion. For a split second, Lisa considered letting him in. Something about his insistence made her hesitate. Miguel called from inside, voice sharp. "Lisa, let's go. We're losing him." She slammed the door, heart aching, and climbed into the cab. As she started the engine, she saw Max pacing in circles, rain plastering his fur to his ribs, eyes following the ambulance as they pulled away. That look, the kind that said, "Don't leave me, don't leave him," followed Lisa down every street as they raced toward the hospital. For the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of something bigger than a routine call. The feeling that fate, or maybe just a dog's stubborn loyalty, was riding with them. Inside the ambulance, Lisa focused on Harold. She monitored his vitals, called out numbers, and did everything she could to keep him alive. But her mind kept drifting to the dog. The connection between them, animal and man, was undeniable. Something primal and wordless that didn't fit neatly into medical protocols or paperwork. As they pulled into the hospital bay, Lisa was surprised to see Max already there, having sprinted after them the entire way, tongue lolling, chest heaving, water flying from his coat as he barked at the doors. The ER staff rushed out, whisking Harold inside. Max howled, throwing his weight at the glass, drawing a sharp rebuke from security. Lisa, catching her breath, stepped in. "He's not dangerous. He's just scared for his owner." The hospital security guard shook his head. "No dogs in the ER. Rules are rules." Lisa glanced at Harold on the gurney, then back at Max, who paced and whimpered, pawing at the glass. "Can someone keep an eye on him at least? He's all alone out here." One of the nurses, a young woman with kind eyes, nodded. "I'll bring him a towel. Poor thing's freezing." As Lisa washed her hands and prepped to help in the trauma bay, the storm outside seemed to intensify. The world in the ER was all harsh lights and clipped voices, but Lisa couldn't shake the image of Max sitting just outside the automatic doors, a soaked sentinel refusing to leave his post. Even as doctors shouted orders and the crash cart beeped its urgent alarms, she kept catching glimpses of Max through the rain-streaked windows, his loyalty a constant, silent plea. In a rare moment of stillness, Lisa stepped out into the lobby and knelt by the glass, peering through at Max. He looked up at her, hope and fear tangled in his golden eyes. She pressed her palm to the glass. "Hang in there, buddy, don't give up on us." The rain blurred the world between them. But Lisa knew deep down that this dog's refusal to leave was more than instinct. It was love, a loyalty that no storm could break. Every second inside the ambulance felt like a ticking bomb. The steady beeping of Harold Miller's monitor rose and fell with each bump in the road, echoing the urgency crackling in the air. Lisa Carter worked fast, her gloves slick with rain and sweat. Her mind locked on each critical detail. Miguel called out updates from up front. 3 minutes out! But it might as well have been 3 years for all the tension winding through Lisa's chest. Harold's pulse was thready. His breaths came shallow, mouth working but unable to form words. Lisa checked his pupils, then pressed a hand to his shoulder. "Hang in there, Mr. Miller. We're almost there. Don't quit on us now." In the faint glow of the ambulance's emergency lights, she saw the man's eyelids flutter. His fingers twitch, a sign maybe, that some part of him was still fighting. Suddenly a thump sounded against the back door. Lisa's heart skipped. Miguel glanced back through the window, brow furrowed. "Is that the dog?" Sure enough, Max was running alongside the ambulance, soaked and panting, refusing to give up even as the tires splashed through pools of rainwater. It was as if he'd made it his mission to stay as close to Harold as possible, no matter what. Lisa swallowed hard. He's not giving up. Not on Harold. Something about Max's loyalty, the way he'd run, howled, and thrown himself into danger, stirred memories in Lisa. She remembered sitting by her own father's hospital bed years ago, wishing for just one sign, one flicker of hope, that love could reach through even the deepest sleep. A sharp jolt brought her back. The ambulance skidded around a corner, blue and red lights reflecting in storefront windows as people peered out. Umbrellas braced against the storm. "Clear!" Miguel shouted, and they surged through the intersection, siren wailing. For a split second, Lisa caught Max's reflection in the side mirror, ears flattened, eyes blazing with determination. "Almost there, Harold," Lisa whispered. She leaned close, voice gentle but urgent. "You have someone who needs you. Don't leave him behind." She reached for his hand and squeezed, willing him to feel the world, to remember the bond that wouldn't let go. They screeched into the hospital bay, doors swinging open to chaos. Nurses, doctors, orderlies in a blur of scrubs and masks. Lisa and Miguel sprang into action, lifting Harold onto a gurney, shouting out vitals and background, the rain painting streaks down everyone's faces. As they wheeled Harold inside, Max barreled forward, trying to leap in after them, nails skittering across the slick pavement. A security guard stepped in, blocking Max. "Hey, no animals inside," he barked. Lisa spun around, heart pounding. "Wait, he's with the patient. He found him. He won't hurt anyone. Please, just let him stay close." The guard hesitated, but Max's frantic whine, half bark, half cry, was almost human in its desperation. Nurses paused, watching. One old doctor, gray-bearded and wise, frowned at the commotion, then nodded. "Let the dog in, as long as he stays out of the way. This is about the patient, not protocol." Lisa wasted no time. She patted her leg, calling, "Come on, Max, stay right here." Max bounded to Harold's side, pressing his body against the gurney as they rushed through sliding doors, wheels squealing across the tiles. The ER's harsh light and antiseptic tang did nothing to faze the shepherd. He watched every move, every twitch, as the medical team swarmed around Harold. Inside the trauma bay, Lisa worked quickly, relaying every detail. Found unconscious in an alley, possible stroke, history of cardiac issues, blood pressure dropping. She felt the dog's eyes on her, an anchor, a silent promise. As she helped adjust Harold's position, she saw Max nudge Harold's hand gently, as if coaxing him back to life. Miguel hovered at the doorway, keeping an eye on Max and the chaos outside. "Never seen anything like it," he murmured. "He's not going anywhere." An attending physician, Dr. Green, stepped in. "Family?" she asked. Lisa shook her head. "No one yet, just this dog. He found him, refused to let us leave." The doctor's eyebrows lifted, but she didn't question further. Instead, she focused on stabilizing Harold. Orders flying, IVs running, machines bleeping. The storm outside roared on, thunder rumbling deep enough to shake the windows. But inside, all eyes were on Harold, and Max refused to move, eyes wide and pleading. The minutes dragged. Harold's stats wavered, the medical team adjusting medications, fighting for every heartbeat. Through it all, Max stayed. If anyone tried to move him, he braced himself, planted in loyalty, only yielding to Lisa's quiet reassurance. After an agonizing eternity, Harold's blood pressure steadied. His breathing deepened. A faint color returned to his cheeks. Lisa let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She knelt beside Max, rubbing his damp head, whispering, "You did it, buddy. You kept him fighting." Max looked at her, tail thumping weakly. For the first time all night, Lisa allowed herself to hope. A nurse appeared, concern etched on her face. Hospital policy says he can't stay inside. Lisa stood, squaring her shoulders. Just give us a minute. He won't be in the way. The nurse hesitated, then nodded. Max pressed his nose to Harold's wrist one last time before Lisa gently led him outside to the lobby, where he curled up by the entrance, eyes never leaving the door to the ER. As Lisa walked back in, soaked and exhausted, she realized something profound had shifted. Tonight, a dog's loyalty had drawn a line in the rain, a line between giving up and holding on. And sometimes, all it took to change a fate was the courage to follow where love led, no matter how impossible it seemed. The ER's fluorescent lights flickered against the storm outside, painting the world in harsh white and cold blue. Lisa Carter stood just beyond the double doors, dripping rain onto the tile, heart still racing as she watched Max settle in the hospital vestibule. Despite the nurse's warning, the big shepherd curled up just inside the entrance, head on his paws, golden eyes fixed on the doors that separated him from Harold Miller. He was a motionless statue of soaked fur and hope, water pooling beneath him as he shivered in the air-conditioned chill. The hospital was alive with the low hum of machines and the murmurs of staff. Outside, thunder rolled like distant artillery, making the windows shudder. Every few minutes, someone walked past Max, some giving him a curious glance, others shaking their heads in disapproval. One older doctor tutted, "Animals have no place in a hospital." But another, a young resident, paused to scratch Max behind the ears and whispered, "Hang in there, buddy." Lisa drifted between the trauma bay and the lobby, unable to ignore the tug of worry for both her patient and his silent guardian. Each time she passed, she checked on Max. He barely moved, except for a faint tremor that Lisa knew was more than cold. It was anxiety, devotion, and exhaustion wrapped up together. Once she knelt beside him, pulling a scratchy gray blanket from a supply closet and draping it over his damp body. "You're a good boy, Max," she whispered, smoothing the fur on his head. "He's still fighting in there. I think he knows you're waiting." Max looked at her with such intensity that it hurt. It was the same look she'd seen earlier, the one that said he would wait forever if he had to. Word about the dog traveled quickly through the hospital. In the break room, nurses argued in low voices. "I heard he found the man in the storm and wouldn't leave him," one said, voice hushed as if speaking about a miracle. "Still, rules are rules," another replied, less convinced. Someone else piped up, "Honestly, the dog's got more loyalty than half the people I know." That night, Lisa couldn't bring herself to go home. She clocked out, changed into dry scrubs, and sat across the lobby, watching as Max began his vigil. The rain came and went in waves, pounding against the windows. Each time someone entered, Max perked up, ears straining, only to slump again when it wasn't Harold. Security relented under Lisa's gentle persistence and the growing sympathy of the night staff. "Just tonight," they warned, "but he stays here by the door." The hours stretched on. Max refused water at first, then lapped a little from a bowl left by the kind-eyed nurse. When Lisa checked Harold's status, she found him still unresponsive, a tangle of wires and tubes tracing out his fragile fight for life. She lingered, whispering to him about the dog who wouldn't leave, hoping he could somehow hear her. A few days passed this way, each one folding into the next. Lisa made Max her special project, sneaking him scraps of roast beef from her sandwich, making sure he had blankets and fresh water. Every morning, the hospital director's frown grew deeper, but Lisa stood her ground. He's not hurting anyone. He's waiting for his owner. I'll take responsibility." Something about Max's presence began to change the atmosphere. Visitors would stop and kneel beside him, telling stories of their own pets, their own brushes with hope or loss. A janitor with a limp brought Max a tennis ball and tossed it gently down the hall. Max only chased it halfway before returning to his post. The story of the loyal dog began to make its rounds on the hospital's private message boards. Some staff still grumbled, citing hygiene and liability, but more found themselves quietly rooting for Max and Harold. One night, as Lisa refilled Max's water, a new nurse approached. "I lost my dad last year," she said quietly, kneeling beside the shepherd. "I'd have given anything to have someone wait for him the way this dog waits. Makes me think maybe love really does keep people alive." It was then that Lisa realized Max's vigil wasn't just about Harold anymore. It was about hope in a place built on hope and loss. It was about the small, stubborn faith that love, wordless, animal, persistent, could stand guard at the edge of disaster and refuse to let go. Lisa pressed her palm to the glass that separated Max from the ER's inner sanctum. "Don't give up, Max. We're not giving up either." Max looked up at her, wagged his tail, and for the first time since the storm began, Lisa smiled. The rain finally slowed. Morning sunlight began to creep through the clouds, staining the world gold. Max, ever vigilant, watched the doors for any sign of Harold. And in the quiet, as the hospital began to stir with the new day, Lisa understood something that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Sometimes hope arrives on 4 muddy paws and waits patiently in the cold, teaching everyone who passes by what it means to love without limits. By the 3rd morning, Max's vigil had become a silent fixture in the hospital's daily routine. Staff brought him water and snacks. Patients in wheelchairs paused to stroke his head, telling him to hang in there. A few nurses even placed bets on how long he'd last before giving up. But Lisa Carter, who'd made it her mission to check on him each shift, knew Max wouldn't quit. Not unless Harold Miller himself came through those doors to claim him. Inside the hospital, hope was flickering, but fragile. Harold's condition was stable, but his mind was still far away. Doctors called it a waiting game. Days stretched thin, a silent battle fought behind closed eyelids and silent lips. Lisa, haunted by the connection she'd seen between dog and man, pushed for something different. One afternoon, while charting her patient rounds, Lisa stumbled upon a recent medical article, "Therapy Animals and Post-Stroke Recovery, a Review of Recent Evidence." The data was striking. Animals, especially familiar pets, could stimulate consciousness, evoke emotional responses, even spark neurological improvements. She tucked the article under her arm and made her case to Dr. Green, the attending physician. "I know it's not standard," Lisa said, "but that dog out there, Max, he's not just any visitor. He's the reason Harold is even here. He's refused to leave for 3 days. If there's any chance his presence could help, shouldn't we at least try?" Dr. Green sighed, arms folded. "Hospital policy is clear. No animals in patient rooms. You know that." Lisa nodded. "I do. But this is different. If it fails, I'll take the heat. But if it works, well, maybe we're standing in the way of a miracle." Wordless tension pulsed between them. Finally, the doctor relented. "You get 15 minutes, under supervision, and I want infection control notified." The compromise wasn't much, but to Lisa it was hope. She hurried to the lobby, found Max sprawled by the door, tail thumping at her approach. "Come on, buddy, you're going to see your friend." She clipped a spare hospital leash to his collar, wiped his paws with a towel, and led him through the maze of halls. Staff and visitors alike turned to watch, some smiling, some grumbling about bending rules. Inside the room, Harold looked unchanged, still and silent, machines charting the slow rhythms of a body at war with itself. Lisa knelt by the bed, coaxing Max closer. The shepherd hesitated, then placed his front paws on the mattress, nudging Harold's hand with his cold, wet nose. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Lisa's heart hammered. What if this was all just wishful thinking? A desperate act by a tired EMT looking for meaning where there was none. Then Harold's fingers twitched. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Lisa saw it. Max whined softly, nudging again. Harold's eyelids fluttered. The monitoring nurse caught her breath. "Did you see that?" Lisa whispered. Max whined again, louder now, and Harold's hand closed around a fistful of fur. A tear rolled down the old man's cheek. It was the first sign of consciousness since his stroke. The nurse, wide-eyed, ran to fetch Dr. Green. Lisa crouched at the bedside, overcome. "Hey, Harold, Max is here. He came through the storm just for you." She stroked Harold's arm, feeling hope surge where only dread had lived before. Within minutes, the room filled with staff. Dr. Green, a pair of nurses, and even the skeptical hospital director. Lisa stood back, giving Max room to rest his head on Harold's chest. The old man's eyes, finally open, found Max's. His lips parted, and a faint rasp escaped. "Good boy." It was barely a whisper, but it was a miracle. A wave of emotion rippled through everyone in the room. Dr. Green blinked back tears. "I'll be damned," he muttered, scribbling notes on his chart. The director, arms crossed, said nothing, but his stern expression softened. In the hours that followed, Harold's improvement continued, slow but undeniable. He squeezed Max's paw. He tracked visitors with his eyes. When the nurse brought in Max for a second supervised visit, Harold lifted his hand and rested it in the shepherd's ruff, breathing easier, tears streaking down his cheeks. Word spread throughout the hospital. Staff who'd once doubted the Max effect now stopped by Harold's room, watching as the dog's mere presence seemed to spark life where there'd been only shadows. Even the toughest skeptics, those who clung to policy over possibility, began to murmur about exceptions, about letting hope override red tape, if only this once. Each time Lisa saw Max with Harold, she felt a lump rise in her throat. She thought of her own rescue dog from childhood, the one who'd stayed with her through chickenpox, thunderstorms, and heartbreak. She understood, in her bones, what it meant to be loved beyond reason, to have someone, human or animal, refuse to leave your side, no matter how long the storm lasted. By the 5th day, Harold's voice, still raspy but growing stronger, called out for Max as Lisa entered. "Is he here?" Lisa smiled, tears blurring her vision. "He's right here, Harold. He never left." Max leapt to the bedside, tail wagging furiously. Harold's hand, now steady, stroked his fur, and for the first time since the night of the storm, laughter, a thin, scratchy sound, but laughter all the same, filled the hospital room. Out in the hallway, Lisa met Dr. Green's gaze. "We might have to update the policy manual," the doctor said, almost smiling. "Maybe," Lisa replied, "but let's start by updating our definition of hope." The transformation inside room 217 was slow at first, a faint flicker, a hesitant promise that hope could be more than just a word whispered late at night. But every day that Max was allowed a brief, supervised visit with Harold Miller, that flicker grew into something real, undeniable, and contagious. Even the most skeptical doctors found themselves watching through the half-open door, tracking the subtle ways in which Harold's recovery seemed to accelerate whenever Max was near. It wasn't just Harold's progress that turned heads. It was the way Max behaved around him. The German shepherd would pad softly to the bedside, stretching out so his muzzle rested on Harold's forearm. He never barked, never demanded attention. He simply was, a living bridge between the silent world Harold had fallen into and the noisy, hurried hospital outside. Every time Harold's eyes opened, the first thing he searched for was Max. If the dog wasn't there, his gaze drifted, lost and anxious, until Lisa or a nurse promised that Max would return soon. By the end of the first week, something miraculous happened. Harold spoke. Not just a single rasp or mumble, but a clear, trembling voice. His first words, hoarse and halting, were for Max. You waited for me, boy." The staff froze, then exchanged glances, some covering their mouths, others blinking back tears. Even the night nurse, hard-edged and known for her no-nonsense attitude, dabbed her eyes behind her clipboard. Lisa Carter found herself at the heart of a growing discussion. Dr. Green, usually all business, started leaving medical journals on animal-assisted therapy on the nurses' station. The hospital's director, who once seemed ready to banish Max for good, instead called a meeting. "I want a committee to review our therapy animal policies," he announced, surprising everyone. "If this is working for Harold, we should consider whether it could work for others." Lisa was asked to join the committee, her practical experience and stubborn advocacy now seen as an asset rather than a nuisance. Skeptical staff members remained, of course. One infectious disease specialist, Dr. Reardon, muttered about allergies, fur, and hygiene. "This isn't a petting zoo," she snapped in a meeting. But for every doubter, there were 2 or 3 nurses, techs, or therapists willing to share what they'd seen with their own eyes. A man who had once been unresponsive now smiling, sitting up and, slowly but surely, relearning to speak, eat, and remember. Max's presence had a ripple effect, too. Other patients began asking about the miracle dog. One little girl down the hall, recovering from surgery, left him a handmade card. "Thank you for helping people get better, Max." The dog's photograph went up on the hospital's bulletin board, surrounded by notes and doodles from staff and visitors alike. He became a sort of unofficial mascot, a living symbol of the hope and humanity that sometimes got lost amid the beeps and alarms of modern medicine. Every morning, Lisa made it a point to check on Harold and Max together. She watched as Harold's color returned, his appetite improved, and most of all, as his spirit revived. The old man told her stories, fragmented at first, then clearer, about his late wife, his years as a high school history teacher, and the day he found Max abandoned by a riverbank as a puppy. "He's always been stubborn," Harold confided with a shaky laugh. "Wouldn't take no for an answer. Not from me, not from anyone." The medical staff started calling it the Max effect. It became shorthand for moments when a patient rallied against the odds, for breakthroughs that made no sense on paper but were real all the same. Even Dr. Reardon softened, caught one day scratching Max's ears in the hall after a particularly tough shift. As Harold's health continued to improve, his bond with Max seemed to deepen. The dog stayed close through every milestone. Harold's first steps with a walker, his first real meal, the first time he remembered his own daughter's name. Hospital volunteers took turns bringing Max in for extra visits, and Lisa found herself coaching a group of new therapy animal handlers, sharing her hard-earned lessons about patience, presence, and letting hope in through any door it could find. Lisa herself changed too. The endless grind of the ER had often left her jaded, her faith in people and sometimes even in herself, worn thin by tragedy and exhaustion. But seeing Harold and Max together reminded her why she had chosen this path. Not just to fix bodies, but to heal hearts, to make space for the kind of miracles that science couldn't always explain. On the day Harold finally sat up unaided, looking 10 years younger than when he'd arrived. The hospital director stood outside the door, hands in his pockets. "You know," he said to Lisa, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it, "maybe this is what hospitals are supposed to be about. Not just medicine, not just rules, but connection." She smiled, watching as Max licked Harold's cheek, tail thumping with joy. "I think we just needed a reminder," she said. And as Max and Harold celebrated another small victory together, one wag, one smile, one word at a time, the healing spread, not just through the man in the bed, but through every person touched by their story. The power of connection had never felt so real or so necessary. The first time Harold Miller spoke his daughter's name, Lisa Carter was there quietly updating his chart while Max sprawled at the end of the bed. "Karen," Harold rasped, voice unsteady but clear enough to make Lisa's heart leap. The name seemed to hang in the air, fragile and hopeful, like the first rays of sunlight after a week of storms. Lisa caught his hand, her eyes shining. "Karen, that's your daughter, right? Do you want us to call her?" Harold nodded, tears welling. For a moment, the tough old man was a boy again, hope and longing etched deep into his lined face. That evening, Lisa worked her contacts and managed to track Karen Miller down in a neighboring town, her number tucked away on an old emergency contact form. The conversation was awkward at first. Karen had been out of touch for months, not out of anger, just the slow drift of distance and busy lives. But when Lisa explained what had happened, when she told her about Max's heroic actions and Harold's miraculous progress, Karen was on the next train to Portland. The reunion, when it came, was not the dramatic rush of tears that some might expect. Instead, it was tentative, thick with the weight of lost time. Karen entered the hospital room with nervous energy, clutching her coat to her chest, her eyes darting between Harold and the big dog at his feet. Harold reached out, his hand trembling. "Karen, you came." His voice broke on the last word. Karen crossed the room in 2 long strides, dropping her coat and kneeling by his side. "Of course I came, Dad. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry it took so long." She wrapped him in a hug, both of them shaking with relief and regret. Max, sensing the joy and pain in equal measure, pressed his nose into Karen's arm, tail thumping softly. Lisa stood in the corner watching, her heart full. She knew how fragile reunions could be, how easily words got tangled, how much hurt could hide under the surface. But as Harold and Karen spoke, old wounds seemed to close a little. They talked of everyday things at first. Karen's job, Harold's garden, the house that now sat quiet and empty except for Max's toys in the living room. But beneath it all, a sense of trust, broken but not lost, began to renew itself. In the days that followed, Karen became a fixture at the hospital. She listened intently to Dr. Green and Lisa, learning everything she could about her father's care. More than anything, she spent time with Max, walking him outside during lunch breaks, brushing the mud from his coat, marveling at his devotion. "He never left his side?" she asked Lisa one afternoon as they strolled beneath the hospital's maple trees. Lisa shook her head, recalling the storm and the desperate hours afterward. "Not once. He blocked my ambulance in the pouring rain, and when we finally followed him, he led us straight to Harold. Max didn't leave even when we brought Harold here. I don't think anyone could have forced him if they tried." Karen looked down at Max, her eyes soft. "He's more than a pet. He's family." Max looked up at her, and for a moment, Lisa felt like she was watching a silent conversation, an understanding that needed no words. News of the reunion spread quickly. Nurses who had once doubted the value of therapy animals now brought their own families by to meet Max. Children recovering from broken bones snuck him snacks. Elderly patients reached out trembling hands just for a chance to touch his fur. The hospital's energy shifted. Small pockets of laughter replaced the usual tension, and hope seemed to settle in the halls like the sun after a long night. Lisa found herself more involved than ever. Dr. Green, recognizing her natural leadership, asked her to help train a new wave of therapy animal volunteers. Lisa gladly accepted, teaching them how to approach patients gently, how to let the animals lead the way, and most importantly, how to be open to the unexpected. In every training session, she told Max's story, how sometimes the best medicine was stubborn love and a refusal to give up. There were moments of drama, too. One day, a patient on the floor suffered a panic attack, refusing to let anyone near. Max, sensing the distress, slipped into the room and sat quietly in the corner until the patient calmed enough to reach out. Another time, a visiting administrator from out of state argued that animals were a distraction from real healthcare. But after watching Harold and Max together, even he conceded, sometimes it's the distractions that save lives. Karen and Harold, once separated by distance and unspoken hurts, now spent their afternoons together, talking and healing. Max lay at their feet, a living symbol of resilience, his presence soothing in ways that medicine alone could never achieve. The three of them, father, daughter, and dog, became something of a legend on the ward. As the sun set one evening, painting the city gold, Lisa watched from the window as Karen and Harold strolled slowly around the hospital garden, Max walking between them. Their laughter drifted up, light and easy. In that moment, Lisa understood that trust could be rebuilt, that families could heal, and that even in the hardest of places, love could find a way back home. After Harold was discharged, the hospital felt strangely empty to Lisa Carter. In the weeks since the storm, Max had become a comforting presence in the halls, a constant companion whose devotion had reminded everyone why hope mattered. Now, as she watched Karen wheel Harold out of the hospital's double doors, Max trotting happily at their side, Lisa felt both pride and a quiet sadness. Some stories ended with a miracle and a reunion, but life, she knew, always brought new challenges. Karen lived in a modest house on the edge of town. The first days at home were filled with laughter and relief. Harold, still fragile but regaining strength, spent hours in his favorite armchair, Max sprawled at his feet. Karen made them both dinner, homemade stew for her father, roast chicken scraps for Max. Neighbors dropped by with flowers and cards, offering rides to the doctor and promises to look in on them. It seemed like the happy ending they all deserved. But on the third night home, a soft spring rain began to fall, pattering gently against the windows. Karen woke before dawn to find Max's bed empty, the back door ajar. Panic spiked in her chest. She rushed outside, calling for him, searching the dark yard and the empty street. There was no sign of the big German shepherd. In the kitchen, Harold sat up, worried. "Where's Max? Did he run off?" Karen tried to reassure him, but her own heart was pounding. Lisa's phone rang before sunrise. It was hospital security. "There's a dog out front," the guard said, voice thick with disbelief. "Looks just like the one that was here with Mr. Miller. He's sleeping by the entrance, won't let anyone near him." Lisa's mind flashed to Max's rain-soaked vigil all those days ago, his stubborn refusal to abandon Harold no matter what. She grabbed her coat and drove straight to the hospital, rain smearing the streetlights into gold and silver blurs. She found Max curled up under the hospital's awning, fur damp, nose tucked under his tail, body shivering from more than just the weather. When he saw her, his tail thumped weakly. Lisa knelt beside him, rubbing his ears, whispering, "What are you doing here, boy? Harold's not inside anymore." Max looked up at her with eyes full of longing, an animal's pure, wordless need to be where he was most needed. It was loyalty deeper than instinct, a kind of love that outlasted even the end of crisis. Lisa called Karen, who arrived a few minutes later, umbrella forgotten, face streaked with rain and relief. "Why did you come back here, Max?" she murmured, kneeling and pressing her face into the shepherd's damp fur. "You silly, wonderful boy. Harold needs you at home." But even as Karen pleaded, Max refused to budge from the hospital entrance. It was as if some invisible thread still tied him to the place where he'd last felt his purpose most clearly. Hospital staff gathered at the windows, watching the drama unfold. Some shook their heads. Others remembered the days Max had spent curled up by the entrance, refusing to leave until he saw Harold with his own eyes. Security hesitated. "We can't have him here all night," the guard insisted. But Lisa intervened, drawing on her newfound confidence and the respect she'd earned during Harold's recovery. "Let me talk to administration," she said. She made her case to the hospital director, reminding him of everything Max had done, not just for Harold, but for the spirit of the whole hospital. "If there was ever an exception to policy," she argued, "it's this dog. Let him come in. Let him see Harold." The director hesitated, but in the end, compassion won out over bureaucracy. Lisa led Max down the quiet halls, the shepherd walking slowly, as if remembering every turn. The night staff greeted him with smiles and soft words. When Lisa brought him into Harold's old room, now empty, Max sniffed every corner, then settled on the floor with a sigh, looking lost, but somehow at peace. It was only when Lisa called Karen and suggested they bring Harold to the hospital the next morning that the final act of loyalty played out. Just after sunrise, Karen and Harold arrived. Lisa met them at the door, and when Harold stepped into the lobby, Max's whole body sprang to life, ears perked, tail wagging, eyes bright with the recognition of his true home. Harold walked slowly, leaning on his cane, but his voice was stronger than it had been in months. "You came for me, didn't you, old friend?" Max nuzzled his hand, then leaned against Harold's legs with all the love in his heart. Karen, overwhelmed, blinked back tears. Lisa convinced the hospital staff to let Max stay with Harold in the lobby for a while longer, just to ease the shepherd's anxiety. The two sat side by side, a picture of devotion. When it was finally time to go, Harold said, "Come on, Max, let's go home. Together this time." And for the first time since his discharge, Max followed without looking back, his loyalty satisfied, his mission complete for now. Outside, as the rain finally let up and a weak sun filtered through the clouds, Karen put an arm around her father, Max pressing close to both of them. Lisa stood at the doorway, smiling. She understood then that loyalty wasn't about geography or habit. It was about the heart, the willingness to cross any distance, to endure any storm, just to be close to those we love. As they disappeared down the walk, the staff watched from the windows, silent and moved. Max's story had become their own, a reminder that sometimes the greatest medicine is simply refusing to give up on each other, even when the world says it's time to move on. The story of Max and Harold soon outgrew the walls of Portland General Hospital. It spread first in whispers among nurses and patients, then in cheerful retellings over coffee in the staff lounge, until finally it caught the attention of the local news. A feature reporter from the city's biggest paper called Lisa one morning, her voice bright with curiosity. Everyone keeps telling me about this miracle dog. I want to hear the whole story, from the very beginning. Lisa agreed to the interview, arranging for the reporter to meet Harold, Karen, Max, and several of the hospital's staff. The reporter arrived with a notepad and a gentle manner, her questions weaving through the days and nights since that first stormy rescue. She wanted every detail: the moment Max blocked the ambulance, the tense hours in the ER, the nights the shepherd refused to leave the lobby, the day Harold's hand found Max's fur and life returned to his eyes. They gathered in a sunlit corner of the hospital cafeteria, where Max lay with his head on Harold's shoe, eyes half closed in bliss as Karen gently scratched his ears. Lisa recounted the pivotal moments, her words measured but warm. Sometimes instinct tells us what logic can't. I'd been trained to follow procedures, to trust the checklist. But that night in the rain, when Max stared me down, something told me to listen, even though it made no sense. Max didn't have words, but he had urgency, and I listened. The reporter's pen raced across the page. How did that moment change you? Lisa hesitated, glancing down at Max. It made me realize that the most important part of my job isn't just about science or protocol. It's about having the courage to be flexible, to recognize that healing isn't always about following rules. It's about listening, and sometimes about love that doesn't make sense on paper. The Chief of Staff, Dr. Green, spoke next, her professional veneer softened by the weeks she'd spent watching Harold recover. Hospital policy is important, but this experience taught us to weigh compassion and flexibility alongside the rules. If we'd stuck to the letter, Max never would have come inside, and Harold's story might have ended differently. We learned that sometimes the heart knows more than the handbook. Karen, usually reserved, wiped away a tear as she spoke. Max's loyalty brought my father back to me. It reminded me that love sometimes means persistence, even when no one else understands. I was scared to face my dad, to admit how far apart we drifted. But seeing the way Max waited for him, how he wouldn't leave no matter how long it took, it broke something open in me. I realized I could try again too, that it's never too late to come home. The reporter asked Harold what he remembered. He smiled, voice frail but full of gratitude. I remember the storm and the darkness, then Max's face. I don't remember much after that, but I know he never left me. Not when I was alone in the woods, not at the hospital, not when I came home. Sometimes hope arrives on 4 paws, and all you have to do is let it in. The interview touched the staff, too. Nurses and aides shared their own stories. The nights they'd slipped Max extra treats. The moments when just seeing him in the lobby gave them strength to get through a hard shift. One young janitor recalled how his own family's dog had kept vigil when his mother was sick. Max reminded me that we all need someone who won't give up on us, no matter what. The feature story, when it was published, quickly made its rounds through the city and beyond. Photos of Max, sometimes wet and bedraggled, sometimes grinning as Harold scratched his chin, accompanied stories of hope and resilience. The article sparked a citywide conversation about animal-assisted therapy, the power of listening to intuition, and the value of making room for compassion even in the most rigid systems. Hospital volunteers were inspired to step up their efforts. Therapy animal applications skyrocketed. One local school launched a reading program where children practiced aloud with therapy dogs at their side. Social media filled with comments, "This is the story I needed today." We need more Maxes in the world. Sometimes the best doctors have 4 paws and a wagging tail. Lisa reflected on it all, sometimes overwhelmed by the response. She was invited to speak at staff meetings, to share what she'd learned. True heroism, she told one group, can come from anyone, regardless of species or status. Listening to intuition, not just procedure, can save lives. Healing is about connection. Sometimes the deepest connections are wordless but undeniable. Systems need rules, but they must remain flexible enough to let compassion through. Karen echoed this sentiment in a radio interview. Her words simple and heartfelt. "We almost lost my dad. I almost lost my chance to make things right. But Max wouldn't let any of us give up. That's the lesson I want people to remember. Love means showing up again and again, even when it's hard." Max, of course, understood nothing of articles or interviews. He only knew that he was with his family, and that every day was a good day as long as Harold's hand was close by. But his story left a mark, not just on those who knew him, but on the entire city. A quiet challenge to love with that same fierce, stubborn loyalty, to trust the quiet urgings of the heart, and to always make space for hope. Months slipped by, and what began as a single stormy night of instinct and courage blossomed into lasting change. Not just for Harold and Max, but for the entire hospital, their neighborhood, and the city beyond. The story of the dog who refused to give up became a quiet legend, retold in classrooms, break rooms, and living rooms across Portland. And at the heart of that legend was the truth that healing is never just a matter of medicine, but a partnership between science and heart, between rules and compassion, between human and animal. After his recovery, Harold returned home for good, settling back into the rhythms of life with Karen and Max. Each morning, he and Max walked slowly down the block, neighbors waving as they passed, some stopping to greet the now famous shepherd. There were difficult days, of course. Harold's body still ached, and memories sometimes slipped away like shadows at dusk. But Max was always there, steady as a heartbeat, a living thread tying the present to the past. Karen found a new closeness with her father, their old wounds softened by the miracle they'd lived through together. They spent weekends tending a small vegetable patch behind the house, Max digging alongside them, turning up carrots and laughter in equal measure. The home, once echoing with silence, was filled now with stories and second chances. But perhaps the most visible change happened at the hospital itself. The administration, moved by what they had seen, officially updated the hospital's animal visitation policies, citing the Max case as a catalyst for their new approach. The policy now recognized that sometimes the rules needed to bend to let compassion in. Therapy dogs became a regular sight on the wards, their paws padding softly through the halls, bringing comfort to patients young and old. Lisa Carter was chosen to lead the expanded therapy animal program, training volunteers in both the technical and emotional wisdom she'd learned from Max. She taught new EMTs that sometimes following your gut meant following a dog through the rain, and that those instincts could make all the difference. Lisa herself was changed forever. She found that she now looked for the silent pleas, the quiet urgencies that might otherwise go ignored. Her job was still full of hard nights and heartbreak, but she held on to a new kind of hope, the certainty that even in the darkest moments, help could come from the most unexpected places. To celebrate these changes and honor those who made them possible, the city held a festival in the park, inviting first responders, hospital staff, therapy animal teams, and the people whose lives they had touched. The air was alive with laughter, music, and the happy chaos of children and dogs playing together. At the center of it all was Max, fur gleaming in the sunlight, sitting tall beside Harold and Karen as the mayor presented him with a special medal, Portland's first honorary hero on 4 paws. Lisa took the stage to speak, her voice steady as she looked out over the crowd. This story isn't just about saving a life. It's about the courage to listen, the strength to trust, and the willingness to act when someone can't ask for help themselves. We all need someone who refuses to give up on us. That's what Max taught me, and I hope it's what we'll carry forward, together. Harold, clutching Max's leash, added with a tearful smile, "Sometimes hope arrives on 4 paws, and all we have to do is let it in." The hospital's chief of staff, Dr. Green, announced the launch of new animal-assisted therapy initiatives. "We are forever grateful to Max and to those who fought for him. Our hospital will always make space for compassion, even when it means changing the rules." Families whose loved ones had been touched by the therapy program shared their stories. One woman, whose son had barely spoken after a car accident, described the day he finally reached out to pet a visiting Labrador, and how, after that, the words began to return. A retired firefighter credited his recovery to a golden retriever who listened to his stories on the toughest days. Each tale, in its own way, echoed the truth Max had shown them all. The deepest healing happens in connection. The ripple effect extended even further. Schools invited therapy dogs into their classrooms, reading programs flourished, and local shelters saw a surge in adoptions. Children wrote essays about courage and kindness, some choosing Max as their subject. The city's online forums filled with messages from people inspired to volunteer, to adopt, to reconnect with old friends and family. Lisa often thought back to that first stormy night, to the moment when her instincts had overruled protocol, and she'd chosen to trust a dog with a desperate message. She understood now that real miracles were rarely loud or flashy. They happened in quiet persistence, in the stubborn refusal to let go, in the small gestures that built into something world-changing. The story she shared was a simple one. When you listen, truly listen, to the needs behind the words, or even in their absence, you open the door to something greater than you could imagine. As the festival wound down and dusk turned the park golden, Lisa, Harold, Karen, and Max walked together through the crowd. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. Their bond, forged in rain and hope, was evident in every step they took, side by side. The city cheered for Max, but the greater cheer was for what he represented. The reminder that love, loyalty, and compassion have the power to change not just one life, but many. And so, as the sun set on that remarkable chapter, Lisa reflected on the story's true lesson, one she'd carry for the rest of her days. Real healing is a partnership, a dance between medicine and compassion, instinct and intellect, human and animal. Sometimes, the most important thing we can do is to be open to the unexpected, to listen when others are silent, and to act with heart, knowing that even the smallest act of loyalty can ripple outwards, changing lives in ways we can't always see. As they left the festival grounds, Max paused and looked up at his family, tail wagging, eyes shining. It was as if he understood everything, and perhaps, in his own way, he did. For in the end, the greatest miracles aren't just about recovery. They're about connection, about refusing to give up, and about finding hope exactly where you least expect it.